Hello and welcome to our 2025 live stream on the future of work and workplace risk with a particular focus on AI and cybersecurity. I'm Ben Wheeler and I'll be your host for today. I am in Brisbane today, so before we begin, I'd like to pay my respects to the traditional owners of the land, the Turrbal people, to elders past, present and emerging. On today's show, we are going to discuss where are leaders falling short on AI and cybersecurity. We're going to be joined by Alana Maurushat, a professor of cybersecurity and behaviour at Western Sydney University. And we're also going to be joined by Adnan Jaswal, who's a founder of SecuGuard AI, to explore how the rise of AI is reshaping workplace risk. But first, let's kick off with a quick update on the recruitment market, in particular in this space. So across Australia, New Zealand and the UK, the demand in the tech sector remains strong. Cyber, of course, the main topic of today, and AI is in the most demand areas. Why is this happening? Well, there's ever increasing cyber threats, which I think most people will be aware of, and there's constant digital transformation. At the same time, of course, although COVID seems like quite a while ago, we have seen a huge increase in the people working from home, and that's increased the threat profile, which organisations, I think, have struggled and continue to struggle to manage. So there are a lot of candidates that I'm no doubt are training up in the area, trying to upskill, but because there is a shortage, essentially. So that has created a real challenge for employers who are looking for that skill set. What's particularly difficult is 41% of employers from our research are still unwilling to sponsor overseas workers. So it's really just limiting that talent pool and making it an incredibly talent short space. So we'll go have a deep dive into it a little bit later, but we do also have, and I'll mention our latest market trends report, which we've just released for 2025, and that will give you a far more detailed look. We've spoken to thousands of candidates, we've surveyed thousands of employers, and you can access a copy through scanning the QR code that will appear on the screen just now. And also, if you just want to put a comment in the link below. So now we're joined by Alana Maurushat. Welcome. And I should say professor. So Alana's a professor in cybersecurity and behaviour, a leading expert in cybersecurity at Western Sydney University, whose role is across computer science and social sciences, a key researcher with CRC Smart Satellites. Her work spans ransomware, ethical hacking, and cybercrime investigations. Alana serves as Cyber Ambassador for the New South Wales Cybersecurity Network and sits on the board of IFW Global, bringing a multidisciplinary lens to cyber risk, privacy, and national security. So, as an intro, you're obviously very qualified on the background of the topic for today. So, thank you very much for joining us. And I'd like to sort of kick off. That's more than welcome. I'd like to kick off with a few questions. So, from your perspective, what is the current state of AI adoption in workplaces, particularly around operational and decision-making roles?
Well, Australia is always an interesting jurisdiction because in my experience of having worked on every continent in the world but for the Antarctic, Australians tend to be typically slow to uptake on new technology, but once they do it, they tend to grasp it in a way that's different from other jurisdictions. So at the moment, from an operational perspective, we're not seeing a huge uptake in AI. And we're not seeing a huge uptake in AI for cybersecurity, in particular in critical infrastructure sectors in Australia. This is contrasted by other jurisdictions that have actually gone with the reversal of being first to implement AI, and there are both benefits and disadvantages to that in the cybersecurity sector.
Where would you say has been one of the first sort of early adopters as opposed to Australia?
Parts of the Middle East, actually. So parts of the Middle East, they were the first to really adopt the crypto components as well. The US as well, a lot of the sectors have jumped full in, especially the banking sector. And then it's a bit of a mix. In China, we see early adopters in certain industries as well. And then it's a mixed bag globally everywhere else. And to be honest with you, I don't pay attention to all jurisdictions, just the one that
there's a lot,
I work with,
Yeah.
And companies that I work with, which is predominantly North America, China, Middle East, and then Australia.
And what do you think is some of the biggest misconceptions about the use of AI and the risks that we're seeing?
Okay, well, everybody talks about AI as it's this generative thing, but it is not at all. So I'm going to explain 5 layers very quickly. Take it as you will. So vast majority of the time when people talk about AI, what they really just mean is automation, digital transformation, and machine learning, which is not new. Those systems and transformations are happening, I would say, across almost all industries in Australia. The next layer, of course, is generative AI. So in that component, that's very much changed the equation. So you see a lot of different generative AI hitting the market. And at this point, you would be hard-pressed to find individuals not using generative AI as a tool to help them in their workforce on a daily basis. But where the real transformation happens is when you're using agentic AI that sits within generative AI, and that can allow for rapid digital transformation on saving money, time, data, etc. And I'll maybe just explain what the difference is between those two tools. So generative AI, it sits on large language models. So think about data sets that could occupy multiple planets, okay? And it doesn't actually perform well for really highly specific tasks within an organization. So what you're seeing at the moment is an absolute explosion in research and products known as agentic AI. And what agentic AI does, okay, so if you were to have like a 20,000-page policy document, believe it or not, ChatGPT would be rubbish at actually going through it and retrieving what you needed in real time for an organization. So a smaller language model known as agentic AI sits and it's able to retrieve in real time the actual components that you might need from a legal perspective, psychology perspective, the internal policy documents within your organization. And that's where the real transformation is going to happen for organizations. And organizations in Australia have been very reluctant to bring agentic AI into the equation.
Why do you think that is?
Because it's scary. I mean, I'm a little bit older probably than many of the listeners. And so in my career, I've had to go through, the internet, mobile phones, and now AI. And I actually think there's going to be a 4th in my lifetime. And these are all like not minor things that have occurred in the last 20 years. And technology has done something to humankind that we haven't seen before. And that the progress is more rapid than it is in other industries, if that makes sense. And so when you have constant change, a human brain actually doesn't perform the way that you might think. It actually gets really, enough is just too much. And I don't know if any of you think the same thing. It's just like stuff is coming at you in social media.
Yeah.
It's coming at you in text. It's coming at you in emails. It's coming at you in endless alerts. And it actually is very overwhelming. And so organizations are going to be slower to uptake on this until they have a bit more faith and there's a bit more, I think, instruction on how to implement it well across an organization. But I think once those use cases are there and people see more and more how this could actually affect their workforce in a positive way, we'll see the uptake.
Thank you. That's quite a very insightful answer to that. And I know we spoke briefly just before the show about the neuroscience aspect, which I know you're passionate in, but certainly aware there's a lot of information that's coming at people more than ever at the moment, which is a key thing I think to certainly bear in mind. So I'd like to just I'll bring in our second guest, and then we'll put everybody together in a panel. So we'll just move through to bring in Adnan, if we can now. Hi Adnan, how are you?
Good, thanks, and thank you for having me, Ben.
Thank you for joining us. So Adnan is a founder of SecuGuard AI. So you've got 20 years experience in cybersecurity. You developed, from my understanding, SecuGuard AI as an advanced AI-driven tool that simplifies and strengthens security risk assessments by leveraging AI. So very keen to hear your thoughts this morning. What would you say, to kick off with, in 2025 are the most pressing cybersecurity threats organizations are facing?
Yeah, look, the threats organizations are facing, and I'm just going to go through the top ones. There's a long list of
I can
threats.
imagine, ever changing.
Absolutely. And especially in context of AI, we're seeing these threats basically augmented by AI. So the cyber criminals are actually using AI in these threats. Phishing by far is the number one, and phishing is essentially using deception mechanisms to get the victims to perform some act. Now, it can be used for data breach. It can be used for getting money out. It can be used as a vector for malware, which then goes into kind of our second threat, which is ransomware. But with phishing, we're seeing a lot of use of AI by cyber criminals, and I'll give you an example where, for one of my clients, the finance department got an email with an invoice saying, "Can you pay this invoice?" But also, the finance analyst got a voicemail on her phone from the CEO of the company saying, "Hey, this invoice is in your inbox. Can you pay it?" But
Urgently,
the voice
no doubt.
exactly, the voice was generated by AI, and the voice sounded like the CEO. And it was a good thing that she then called back the CEO to make sure that it was actually him and didn't pay the invoice. But imagine, the level of AI use and level of social engineering in this phishing attack. So we're seeing a lot of that use of AI in phishing attacks. We're seeing a lot of ransomware attacks. There was a report out by Cloudflare that said about 62% of victims actually paid the ransom as well. Some of these ransom attacks are augmented by AI, by the use of deep fake, basically, for ransom. And then there's DDoS attacks, which are distributed denial of service attacks to knock either websites or systems off. So they're the three big ones that we're seeing.
How close do you think, if it hasn't happened already, to, you mentioned about the CEO getting a voicemail, the phone call, but I have seen, and someone did it with me, with actually as if it was on a Teams call and talking, all the hand movements, everything, and I was quite scared by that. Are you seeing that actually going up in the number of use, or what would you say around actual video?
Yeah, exactly. So cyber criminals tend to use a vector that's low cost. As soon as you kind of start getting into some of the higher cost, the return might not be that much. So they're using generative AI for voice, email, more often. Previously, if you kind of look at the phishing emails that were produced, we used to tell our clients that look for signs, spelling mistakes or grammar not being that good or something like that. But now these emails are generated by AI and they look very, very real. And then you augment them with some of the other voice type of or text messages, and everything all of a sudden looks very real, and it gets difficult to stop these phishing attacks.
And have you found with changes, things like the data or privacy acts and regulatory changes have had an impact with your customers around how they then approach it and what the focus areas around the risks are?
Yeah, absolutely. So compliance, we're seeing a increased compliance burden. So again, I'm going to reference the Cloudflare report where 99% of the respondents said that they have to increase their budget in terms to in order to comply with the various compliance requirements. So if you're in finance or financial sector, there's APRA compliance, and if you're in government, there are different government compliance regulation, and then critical infrastructure has their own. So that is a massive issue in terms of, one, it is very labor intensive. Two, a lot of the organizations, because it is labor intensive and it requires a lot of resources, they get into what we call a compliance first mindset rather than a resilience first mindset. And what I mean by compliance first is, they treat compliance as tick the box. So it doesn't necessarily mean that ticking the compliance box is going to reduce your risk. So you've got to shift the mindset from a compliance first to a resilience first. And that is one of the main use cases we are actually tackling with SecuGuard AI. And Alana mentioned agentic AI, so we're using agentic AI to solve the security risk assessment and compliance problems for defense clients, for government clients, and for other clients that run critical infrastructure.
Would you say, in terms of the industries, that they're probably is there a higher risk space, would you say? Or is it fairly generic that everybody's facing pretty similar challenges in terms of attacks and that sort of thing?
I think these attacks, everyone is facing these attacks, from small businesses, medium businesses to enterprise. Mm-hmm. But the higher risk, I would say, would be obviously the defense sector, the government agencies, and then also the organizations running our critical infrastructure are the highest at risk.
It's interesting that you say that, because we're in the defense space, particularly within government. There's a lot more questions around the use of suppliers' use of AI, because obviously they're concerned about risks and so on. So that would make sense. That is a particularly hot topic in that area. So thank you for those insights. What we'll do is we'll bring actually two of our interviews in together as a panel. So I'd like to bring back on. Welcome back, Alana. So I'll actually start with yourself. So both cybersecurity and AI are transforming rapidly. How do you think leadership teams should rethink risk and innovation in this space for 2025?
So I guess I will start with two things. Technology has always been Janus-faced, so it's a double-edged sword. That will never change throughout humankind. The one thing that most platforms do not do as of today is to detect deep fake video. Deep fake voice, some of the platforms can do a little bit, but deep fake videos are actually the hardest to process, and that's due to compression technology. So at the moment, there's actually a global race to get the best deep fake detection technologies to market, to integrate with products, but we don't have good detection at the moment. And so for that gap, and I suspect that gap's going to be about 3 months before that technology emerges and actually operates properly, we're at the greatest risk over the next 3 to 6 months. So one thing from an operational perspective that we're going to have to start to look at is, I mean, you don't want to say you're going to have to increase your budget, but I'm here to tell you, you're definitely going to have to increase your budget because of the following reason. The phishing complications that we're seeing and level of sophistications are at the point where no human on the planet could detect if it's fake or if it's real. The research is there. We've got our own research project at the moment and our own 𝐥𝐞𝐽 AI that we're developing for this problem. You can't train awareness around this. The only awareness that can happen is just to let people know that this is a possibility and you're not going to be able to detect it. And so some of the things that organizations might need to do is to develop really specific protocol for how they verify if something is real or not. And it won't be looking at an image. It'll have to be something else. And so one organization that I work with, we have a secret code word that we use, and you have to go back to one individual with secret code words. And if someone doesn't know the secret code word, we just kick them out of the meeting.
Right. Yeah.
Okay.
In case the person will be in it. Yeah.
Yeah. And then the other component around the deepfake videos, because it actually worries me the most. But from an operational perspective, we've also been conducting research on different types of generative AI in the workplace and the safeguards that those generative AI systems have for companies. ChatGPT has the least amount of safeguards after the South Korean platform Deep AI. Copilot has invested significantly more money and thought into diversity of data sets and safeguards around a lot of parameters. Now, I'm not saying, and I'm arguing that you should be all going out and using Copilot, but not all AI is created equally. And the safeguards around that, the research is really only starting to emerge in that space. Mm-hmm. So you need to be careful with what you sign up for and give employees specific instructions on what you want them using and what you don't want them using. And how you monitor that might be a separate issue.
Do you think, Adnan, that might be one of the part of the big challenge is monitoring the use of AI, particularly with the rise of, I know, a lot more people working from home, hybrid work, not to mention that you can have people working completely different, we talked about continents, but different locations. Is that part of the challenge?
Yeah, look, absolutely. So the cyber threat nowadays is actually quite persistent. And, you know, you mentioned rethinking risk. One of the challenge I see is that organizations, especially in Australia, still see risk as a bit of a static entity. And if they go back to the compliance frameworks, they might have a risk register and they might visit it every 6 months, and they might do a risk assessment every 6 months or every year. That is no longer sufficient, you know, because the risk is very dynamic. So they need to move to more of a continuous or continual risk assessment, you know, a real-time risk assessment. That's where they have to move to. Unfortunately, currently it's very static. Organizations might have a risk register, and then it's linked to what we call security controls. They're based on the risks that were identified maybe 6 months ago, and those controls are very static. So unless we move to more of dynamic, you know, AI-enabled controls, we're going to see a lot of these attacks get through the defenses, and you'll see a lot of data breaches, which is actually the case right now.
It certainly sounds from an organization perspective that, Alana, budget has to increase, and we've all seen our insurance premiums skyrocket. I no doubt that's for a reason, and no doubt we have to invest in it. And Adnan's saying about being dynamic with it. Clearly, a 6-month review is what you're saying is not going to cut it. It needs to be a dynamic, continual process, which, yeah, certainly is, I'm sure, a good advice for a lot of people listening and thinking around this transformative change, because it's constant. How do you think, looking into sort of as far as 2030, I know it's difficult to point out, but what do you think are going to be the biggest challenges for organizations, aside from what we've mentioned about having to be very dynamic with it? Do you think that there are going to be certain things that are going to stick out for an organization?
Did you say 2030? Did you say 2030? Yeah.
Yes, I did.
So the year of the Olympics, I'll tell you what, that's going to raise all sorts of interesting security challenges. It already has.
Imagine.
By 2030, we'll all be a bit more comfortable with AI, but I actually think there's going to be a new revolution between now and then. And that's going to be in an area of neuroscience, cognitive connection between AI brains and integration into the human body. That revolution is coming. It takes form in different components. Organoids are a thing. I know you haven't heard of it. Look it up.
I will now.
So, like, you either just give up and fold because the technological revolutions happen so quickly, or you take a deep breath and go, I got this, because I can hire someone a little bit, I mean, I don't want to say wiser or younger, but depending on the asset, someone who can guide you and make a little bit better sense. In the future, there's going to be jobs called AI whisperers. They're literally going to be people who just advise when AI makes sense and when it doesn't and what the risks are. And those people are going to have highly technical skills, but more importantly, they're going to be able to explain things in different layers down from the bottom to the top. And they're going to be employed in order to do all range of tasks within organizations. We don't yet have, I don't think, a job on Seek or any recruitment platforms called AI Whisperer, but you heard it first. AI Whisperer is going to be a job.
Yeah. Now you've coined it. I can imagine it will come up. Would you agree, Adnan?
Yeah, look, absolutely. Absolutely. I think 2030 is too far in the future.
Right, yeah. The pace a bit, yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah, imagine it'd be hard to pick, but it sounds a bit a year or two ahead with the amount of change that's happening. What do you think would be, if you pick, say, Alana, one mindset behavior in an organization as of now that would be a good protection? You've mentioned about the code word, which I hadn't heard of before, but I think that sounds like a great idea. Is there any other things you'd say for a business to think of that they could do now?
Well, sometimes the hardest part in a business is to get behavioral buy-in to something. And so it's actually not, it's the behavioral buy-in and the cultural change is something that's really quite prolifically difficult across most organizations. One method that has proven effective is to bring it down to the individual level. So not only are the things that Adnan spoke about phishing and deepfakes and other affecting organizations across cybersecurity, but they're affecting you at the home front too. And so the one thing that we haven't talked about is how deepfakes are being used for mass amounts of, it's not ransomware, but it's a form of blackmail around people creating fake pornography videos and uploading them into all sorts of formats. That crime has gone off the shelf in the last 2 months. And so if you talk to your employees about that and bring it into a personal level, so that they understand that it affects the individual, and then you might get the behavioral switch to think, well, I need to fight this at home, but I also need to fight it up the ranks as I come forward. And having those conversations with your kids to get them to help you with it isn't a bad approach. It's actually a proven approach in research.
I'm definitely taking that on board as a parent, but also often listening to the human element that it comes back to, that what we can do. And like I said, the behaviors make a huge difference. Adnan, would you add to that or say anything differently?
Yeah, look, absolutely. So, I mean, in the cybersecurity space, humans are the weakest link usually, and it's the behaviors, that need to change. And unfortunately, we're still talking about very, very basic forms of behaviors, like writing password on a post-it note and, sticking it somewhere, as a very basic form.
I disagree. I think that's infinitely more safe than some of the systems we use.
Yeah, look, absolutely, absolutely. Till you have some cleaner coming in, disguised, or criminal disguised as a cleaner and coming in and looking at it. But yes, I do agree. Yeah, look, like I said, behavior change. We have to move towards more security that adapts a little bit more real time. AI augmented. It goes into especially your identity verification as well. At the moment, it's pretty static in terms of usually just a username and password, or maybe just two-factor authentication on top. That will need to improve. Maybe biometrics, or maybe continual authentication, not just you authenticate at the start of your session and that's it, which is more prone to man in the middle. So it'll have to be continual, and augmented by obviously AI. We'll have to move towards zero trust networks, zero trust architectures to kind of reduce that risk of human making either mistakes because of habit or behavior.
Thank you both for those insights. As a lot to take in, and certainly got me thinking, so very thought-provoking. So if anyone's watching today would like to reach out and get in contact with either Alana or Adnan, you can look in the comments below for how to do that. But thank you both once again. Really enjoyed you joining us, and very insightful insights. Thank you.
Thank you for having us.
And just a reminder that we do have, as I said, the market trends report, so you can scan that and be able to find it, or in the comments below, full information about what's happening from a recruitment perspective. And lastly, if you are looking to start or enroll yourself, you can contact us via the details below. Thank you very much for today. Thank you for joining us. Thanks for us.